Every entrepreneur loves the sound of a sale being made. The customer says yes, the invoice gets paid, the transaction goes through, and for a brief moment, everything feels like it's working. But then comes the part we don't always talk about: the fees, the margins, the systems, the hidden costs of getting paid. And for many business owners, those small percentages add up to something much larger than they realize. Welcome, or hopefully welcome back to The Reluctant Entrepreneur. Today's guest is Viktor Popovic, president of Avendo, a company focused on helping businesses rethink the way they process payments, protect margins, and build smarter systems around one of the most basic parts of business, getting paid. But this conversation isn't about payments. It's about the entrepreneurial journey behind the solution. Viktor has built, sold, and returned to business ownership. He understands the pressure of making big decisions without perfect information, the importance of resilience, and the challenge of building a company that doesn't depend entirely on the founder. In this episode, we'll talk about how his early life experiences helped shape his view of risk and leadership, what motivated him to jump back into entrepreneurship after selling his first business, and the moment he recognized that the payment industry needed a better answer. We'll also talk about systems, margins, founder dependency, and what entrepreneurs can do before they're forced to adapt under pressure. And it all begins right now. Stick around. Hey, Viktor, welcome to the show. I'm excited to have this conversation today.
Hey, Mike, thank you. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So let's get back in our time machine and go back in time. What were some of the early life experiences that shaped the way you think about risk and resilience and leadership?
Yeah, my really early life was shaped by just sheer grit to survive. I was born and raised in former Yugoslavia, and when the Civil War broke out in early '90s, I didn't want to take part in it. I was 17. My father passed away a few months before that, and I had to make the decision what to do with my life. So I decided to move to neighboring country, Hungary, thinking the war is gonna pass quickly, and I'm gonna go back and finish my studies and all that. Unfortunately, the war lasted for almost 5 years, so I ended up staying in Hungary for four years. Really, I would say probably the most challenging part of my life personally, as far as you go into a new place, you don't have the network, you don't have the family, the friends, you don't understand the systems, you don't understand the language. You have to learn first and foremost the language to adapt. Figure out your legal status in the country and all that. And then 4.5 years later, I had an opportunity really to come to the United States and study here, which I welcomed, and I came to Florida. Graduated after 4 years of being here with Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in business administration and airport and aviation management. And then the next wave of challenges came along after 9/11. Aviation was really in a tough shape in early 2000s, so couldn't find a job. And I really had a lucky break. A friend of mine came to me and asked me if I wanted to start a business, an e-commerce business for that matter. And I was like, yes, of course, without
Sure,
really
why not?
knowing.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, without knowing what are we doing, who's doing what, like what products are we going to be selling. Just, yeah, I'm ready. Anyhow, so I came up with about a list of about 40 products related to aviation industry, because that was my sort of specialty, and because of the work that I've done in Budapest, in Hungary. And one of the products on that list was these pressure surface cleaners for cleaning airport hangar floors. And my friend, who was already sort of versed with this keyword analysis, and we're talking about 2003, right? This is long
It's the
time ago.
early days of
And
SEO.
early days of e-commerce and SEO. That's absolutely right. And so he says, hey, it looks like anything with word pressure, there's a very high number of searches and very low supply of the websites offering this type of product. And he says, why don't we focus on pressure washers and pressure sprayers and pressure cleaners? And if it doesn't work out, we'll go back to the original idea of aviation parts. Well, it worked out. I knew nothing about pressure washers. I I had to learn literally because I never held a pressure washer in my hand. I had to kind of like go to a store and look at it and touch it and feel it and that sort of stuff. Um, it wasn't easy. But fast forward, 2017, my business partner wanted out because he had another business that he sold. So I bought him out, and at that time we unfortunately lost a good traffic, really excellent traffic that we enjoyed for many years from Google. All the organic, uh, you know. Visitors that were coming to our websites, it was just literally overnight gone. So I had to pivot and decided to really shift my focus onto Amazon and built a store there. Really built. We sort of became a seller authority over the next few years. Again, a few years later, 2024, I decided to sell the business. It was time for me to exit after 21 years. I said, I think I gave it my all. I'm sure there's somebody better, smarter, quicker, and more adaptive to new technologies that can take it over and take it to the new heights. So I sold the business, and a year later, I started a payment processing industry, something that I had back of my mind as a merchant. And here we are today. Just running I'm a co-founder of Avendo.tech, a company in payment industry.
I was going to ask you if you're younger, if you were entrepreneurial, if you had an entrepreneurial desire when you were younger. I'm going to almost answer that for you, and then you can correct me.
Yeah.
My guess is you would not have considered yourself an entrepreneur or entrepreneurial. However, leaving your home country twice removed, from the former Yugoslavia to Hungary to the United States, is very entrepreneurial, right? Not in a classic sense. I mean, you didn't set out to start a company, but the fact that you were willing to take the risk, you were willing to do something, be somewhere, speak a language you had no familiarity with, but you did it anyway, to me, illustrates perfectly it, at least the entrepreneurial spirit that was there. Do you think, looking back, well, first of all, at that time, would you have considered yourself entrepreneurial? And if not, do you think, looking back, you realize you were in some way?
You're 100% correct. No, I never considered myself an entrepreneur. I've always really, even my first few years of starting e-commerce, I've always thought that I'm the best number two. In other words, serving under the leader, because I'm really good in filling in the gaps. Like I react really well. I can solve problems. But I never really was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna have a business and I'm gonna run it and I'm gonna do something with it. That was never really my thought in early days. And like I said, even when I started the business, I just I always thought I was the best follower. But I guess I learned some skills along the way. So here I am running another business. I have a partner, but yeah, I'm running it on my own and just trying to think outside the box. Every time there's a problem, you have to come up with a solution. I always say, people come to the office like, hey, what do we do here? Like, and then I turn around, like kind of joke, like, there's nobody out behind me. Nobody can answer that question. I guess it has to be me.
That's funny.
But yeah, there you go.
During your first run in business with the pressure washers. Was there anything you learned or experienced in that role that you said, I'm definitely not going to do that in my next business? Were there any like negative lessons?
Coming from a socialism and really communism initially, the mindset is completely different. You don't have the ease of access to a capital, so it's really the mindset is you save the money and then you spend the money. Not like, here, I'm going to borrow, I'm going to use someone else's money, or you can just going to a bank, right, and borrowing money and using that. That's not present when you come from one of these countries. And it took me really, really long time to accept that it's okay to borrow money and use that for things that you need in the business. So, once in a while, I'll still kind of have a break in my head, and sometimes it helps. All right, I don't overspend on new things. Very methodical and very detailed in things, when I'm choosing. Another thing is really being reactive to the situation, not creating something by design. Initially with Ultimate Washer, that my first business, it was, obviously it was new, like you mentioned, e-commerce was an infant during that stage. So whenever we had a problem, we'd be reacting to it, and we'd be grabbing, okay, we need something to organize our tasks, right, for employees. So let's grab this tool. And then, CRM, okay, we're going to do this. And we need inventory management system. Okay, well, how about this? But never really thought through, okay, are these systems communicating? They're speaking to each other. Like, how are they connected? It was just like haphazard. And I remember, after a few years, we ended up with having to manage seven product databases because of all these different systems. And that's an enormous amount of work that had to be done by our staff, just to, whenever we had price updates, whether it came from the vendors that they gave us new price lists, or us just updating our prices. And so these are some of the things that you just learn along the way, and then you fix it when you can. Like I am now, I'm really designing the business. I'm not working off of what do I need. I'm thinking through all the way from A to Z. And it's much easier, I would say, now that once you have that knowledge, that experience, it kind of teaches you, don't do that, do this.
Yeah, second time could be a little sweeter. At what point did you look at the payment industry and think this needs to be better? Or did you? Or was there another reason you got into the payment industry? I guess a better way to frame the question is, did you say there's enough room in there for me and jump into the crowded pool? Or did you find a problem that you thought you could address better than anyone else?
So I don't think it was a one isolated situation that made me think in the direction of payment processing. It was a series of events. The most important one, I would say, is, as a merchant, realizing that I didn't have many choices. There was not enough, in my opinion, enough competition in real time. You can have you can get a statement at the end of the month, and then you would be looking at the statement, and there's so many line items, and you could be 2, 3, 4 pages, 5, maybe sometimes 10, depends on how many transactions you have. Different kinds of explanations, descriptions of these fees, and you just like, okay, I don't understand it. You hand it over to your accountant, and then they do the daily entries, and that was it. I said, there's got to be a better way as far as the competition, because in the system and the approach that has been worked on or has been used for the past 20, 30, 40 years is you find one credit card processor, and they tell you this is going to be your best rate, and this is it. We promise this is the best in the market, and then you kind of trust them. But then you don't have a way of comparing any of that. And so,
Isn't it funny how everyone is the best? Everyone has the best rate.
yeah, right. It was like,
Right.
yeah, I can slash that price. I can give you,
Hard to-
3 cents better over here, five, 1 base points over there, and you don't have a way of comparing that. So we, with Avendo, we are changing that. We are allowing really payment processors to receive card information from a merchant, and they give us prices dynamically, real time, and then we decide based on the price responses that we receive. We choose the best available rate at that moment, and then we route the transaction to that processor to complete the transaction. And so it's very different than your traditional credit card processing today, but we're hoping that this gives more transparency and more, again, competition for merchants that have been really craving for some system to kind of be more even field, right? With when you look at the industry itself, and so that's where we kind of step in. But yeah, there wasn't a single one situation that brought me to it. It was a series of events, like just thinking about it, and at the end, like, hey, let's give it a shot here.
What specific problem were you seeing that business owners, I asked from your point of view, now from business owners, what do you think they either didn't understand or simply do you think they didn't understand the cost of a transaction or didn't care about the cost of the transaction? In my company, we accept online payments, but we're not an e-commerce company. We're a brick and mortar factory, and we build very expensive equipment. We have the ability to accept payments. We do sell spare parts, and some people like to pay for it online, but it's not a huge part of our business. So, to be fair to us, we weren't really shopping for the best rate because 1 basis point isn't a huge. We don't have a lot of volume in e-commerce, so we really didn't care. So we actually just integrate it through our QuickBooks, Intuit platform, which is a little bit more expensive, but someone can get an invoice and electronically pay it all through the same system. So it's just easier for us. But do you think that outside of people like me that don't have a lot of volume in e-commerce, for those that do you think they just accept whatever price there is, thinking, well, that's just what it costs? Or do you think they just really don't understand the cumulative effect of, death by 1,000 transaction fees?
Yeah, it's all of the above, really. Number one is inability to understand all the terminology and all the different fees, and I didn't as a merchant, because it is so complex. I'll tell you right now, there's over 20 different factors that each transaction comes with. So when the consumer enters the card information online, or whether it's a swipe, there's 20 different factors that are being taken into account by the network, which is Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and then also acquiring bank, credit card processor. There's many layers. There's ISOs agents, referral partners. There's a lot of people in between that are all taking a small cut, and that adds up. So I myself, I had no idea that so many parties are involved in the process. And so as a business, for instance, I had very high ticket items, $2, $3, $4, $5, $10,000, which people, some businesses will put on their card. And I had no idea until I started payment processing that commercial card, number one, is considered high risk. Online payment is considered high risk, and then the ticket item size of the sale is also very high risk. So by default, I was always paying the highest fee, not even knowing the reasons what that is. So that's why I think, because business owners, we get busy with day-to-day stuff, and we just take credit card processing as a default. It's an expense, and we don't have any way around it. We're trying to change that. We're trying to say, yes, there's a way to save this. Now, if we introduce this competition amongst the processors, we can save you half a point or maybe one full percentage point of every sale. And so, not to say that we are, not friendly to payment processors, because we're bringing in volume, and they have now, they're privy to the information of, like I said, 20 different factors, and they can adjust the rate on the go. So it's a win-win in both cases, something that processors didn't have in real time, and then merchants that, again, have a sort of a friend now that can monitor and help them get the best rate in real time.
One thing I didn't realize as a merchant, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I've come to believe that even though there's a basic transaction rate percentage-wise, it's a range, because if someone buys something from us that has a reward, it's an award card, it's a cashback card, or it's a really, it's like one of those Capital One, spend $100 and we'll give you $1 million worth of credits on something. Those come with higher fees than a very traditional no-frills credit card. Am I correct in that realization?
100%, yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
so
that is correct.
Yeah, because I remember the first time that hit us, some of our machines that we build sell for, low six figures. And it's not too unusual. Well, no, it is unusual, but it's not rare that someone will actually buy a machine, $100,000 plus, using the credit card to pay for it. And it's a little bit cringeworthy for us, because that becomes a pretty big fee. Even if the percentage is small, the dollar amount is reminds you what you're paying. But we it's the cost of doing business for us. But that's when we really noticed, like, oh my God, where'd that come from? I thought our fee was 2% or 1.5% or whatever. And they went, well, it was a rewards card. Like, I'm not getting rewarded for that transaction. I'm paying for that transaction. So let's assume that there's a fixed rate, just for the sake of a benchmark, and call it 2%, just for the sake of discussion. How much higher or lower than that 2% can a transaction fee actually be, based on the issuer, the card issuer, and the reward status of that company and of that card and all of that? How much does it really vary? That's out of the merchant's control.
Yeah, when they tell us 2%, it's really for the very basic card, which is a consumer card. It's a debit card, not even a credit card. And when the transactions are up to $50, right? Those are the ones that will generate 2%. Easily 1% above that. I was talking to a business owner last week. He's in PR software business, subscription type business. And we were talking casually, and I asked him, he uses Stripe, and I asked him, I said, do you know what your fees are? And he says, no. And I didn't expect him, because listen, I never knew what my fees are when I was the merchant. It's not something you focus on. But he took the statement right there as we were talking, and he's calculating it. He's like, he says it's 4.2%. And mind you, Stripe advertises a flat rate for card not present, meaning online transactions, 3.3%. This is what they advertise on their website. And here is, the owner says, oh, it's 4.2. And he is like, I was like, yeah, that's high. And so by introducing this, again, the competition, we want to limit that. Yes, there's you mentioned rewards cards, and this is all agreements between the banks and the Visa. But sometimes you international cards, are you going to pay 4.5% on that? Why? So we're trying to lower that risk for the banks by providing them the correct information from the card, and then the same way, just um, helping the merchants pay what's fair.
Yeah, I'm just delaying. See if that phone stops ringing. There we go. Yeah, that was kind of a rude awakening for me when I realized we were paying for the person's next vacation, not the bank. You've talked about the importance of building systems before a business is forced to adapt, right? In other words, preempt that move. What does that mean in practical terms?
I'm sorry, I got distracted. Can you repeat that question?
Yeah, no problem. In my research, I've learned that you've talked about the importance of building systems before a business is forced to adapt. Preemptively fixing something or creating a system. What does that mean in practical terms?
Yeah, so the big thing for me is, like, in early years, founder memory is a system, right? Because the owner will remember the customers' names. They'll know all the vendors. They'll know the shortcuts to the systems, and that's how they make the decisions. But the founder memory is not the real system, right? And if the company doesn't recognize that early enough and start creating systems, and a simple example could be just writing SOPs. It could be an SOP for how do we handle cold outbound emails, right? How do we handle when the leads come in? How do we channel them? Um, if an individual, a new hire, needs to constantly be trained by a person and ask questions, then there's a big gap. So therefore, for me, I've always I was part of entrepreneurs organization for many, many years, and this is one of the things that I've learned is really having good SOPs in place is keeps all the employees on the same page, and everybody um, makes the right decision based on the procedures that are written down. And that's one benefit of it. And the second benefit is already really when you're trying to sell the business down the road, the new owners want to make sure that they can take it over and can follow the same processes and they don't need to reinvent the wheel, or they don't have to rely on the founders to stay there for a year to teach them the business. Um, so yeah, building around systems that you're implementing is the key. Systems need to be able to communicate, um, and as the business grows, it gets older. That becomes more and more difficult as you're adding, obviously, all these different tools and systems, because you have to try to make them where they're able to communicate. If that's not the case, there's really a breakdown in communications between them. So that's kind of my lesson. It's just being on top. Like, can you make sure that this inventory system can communicate, with Amazon real time? Can we feed our inventory status every 15 minutes to Amazon, because Amazon recognizes that you are a well-established business if you can tell them real time what your inventory is. That we trust your inventory, right? Now we're going to send you sales. So it's all connected.
Yeah.
And so that's the important lesson that I had to learn.
Going back to your Stripe example, I think the fact that, yeah, they're a credit card processor. There's a lot of credit card processors. I think where they stand out, maybe more than others, is are they selling the actual processing, or are they saying we integrate with your website? I think that's what they're really pushing is, say you build on Squarespace as an example. Squarespace likes to work with Stripe or whoever they're working with. Let's just say Stripe in this case. It's already integrated in. All you have to do is link your Stripe account and boom, all of a sudden your Squarespace website accepts payments processed through Stripe. It seems like their approach is not, hey, we're the cheapest, we'll beat any transaction fee, we'll, whatever. They're really selling integration on the back of credit card processing. And people who use Stripe, where they could probably much more economically use like your service or others, are really buying the integration, or at least the perception of buying the integration, or the ease, the link your account, 3 clicks, boom. Next thing you know, money's coming into your bank. They're paying for the convenience. And I think it's a difference of, what are they selling? Are they selling credit card transactions, or are they selling integration into a website and one button access and a shortcut? And the same goes for what you had just said. It's Amazon values partners that can have real-time inventory update. And when you build a business, you're not thinking about having to serve Amazon, right? You're thinking about Amazon, being just a landing spot for your product. But there's things that have to integrate in order to make you more valuable, and vice versa. Many times, sometimes per day, entrepreneurs are forced to make big decisions with very incomplete information. How have you learned to make decisions when you just don't have perfect clarity? I mean, we're kind of feeling our way through the dark many times, right? And so, what's your advice to those who don't have all the perfect information in front of them, but they have to make a decision? How do you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. When we're working on a project, and there's plenty of mini projects that we're working on right now in Avendo, which nobody has experience with, right? Because it's new, it's innovative, it's disruptive. The most important is really doing that thorough and detailed research, and so initially giving instructions to whoever is going to take on the task. What we got to ask questions. What do we want to know? What are things that we do not want to know? What are we doing if, right? What are some of the things that we may do if things go wrong? What can we test once the project is finished? So there's a lot more questions that we try to, when we have a team meeting, is figuring out what are all the questions that we want to have answered. Because one of the hardest things is for you to, when you sign a project to a team member and they come back and then you have 5 more follow-up questions, or, oh no, that's not exactly what we meant, this is the direction. It just deflates the whole situation, and people can get demotivated, and that's one thing. And then also, once the information comes back, I am very open to suggestions from team members, especially those that have done all the work beforehand, because they have read more than what they are really sharing. They're sharing just the highlights, obviously, during the meeting session of what their findings are. So that also kind of elevates them and shows appreciation for their work. Not to say that we always go that direction of what their recommendation is, but a lot of times we do, because if nobody has experience and the research shows that this is the right direction, then we do that. So yeah, my logic is, one cannot expect to have that perfect information. I think one has to have enough information to make the right decision. That's kind of my motto has been, and sometimes we may not make that right decision. and that's okay. As long as we're adaptive enough to pivot and make the changes along the way, be flexible, not be rigid and stubborn. Be aware that you may have to have make adjustments along the way.
And on the topic of decisions, what advice would you give to a founder who feels overwhelmed by the weight of those decisions? How do you avoid like just burnout or overwhelm? Too many decisions.
I think delegation for me has been the success story for that. Um, Really having good, director, or I don't know, it depends on the size of the company, but a right hand person that can carry the torch. Once the decision has been made for the whole company to kind of that the decision and information, the reasons behind why we're doing this to trickle down throughout all the layers, because once people buy into what they're doing, it becomes much easier. Like if you're trying to force, like so many companies now trying to go through AI changes, right? The bigger you are, I think harder it is nowadays to convince everybody in the company that that the AI change is positive and that it's going to affect positive, because people know it's not going to be positive for everybody. And so being able to really use HR department to your strength when you have to have situations like that, as far as making changes to your culture and thought process. Um, I personally never really, I mean, I'm just being candid here. I never really had that type of a pressure to say, oh my God, if I make this decision, it's wrong. I just live with it. I guess I just, once I had enough information and once I'm locked in, I feel this is the right decision. I was okay with that. I never really struggled with either making a decision or staying the course. I think maybe that's another thing. Just trusting the process. If you believe that what you're doing and the steps that you've chosen are going to get you to that next stop, just trust the process and stick with it. And maybe that has been kind of the helping asset that I maybe have and my skill. I don't know, but that's been my my fortune, that I've just once decision is made, I'm pretty good at sticking with it.
For someone listening or watching who's already built a business and is wondering whether they have the energy to build another one, you were there. Uh, what would you tell them?
I didn't think when I sold my business, I didn't think that I'm gonna definitely start a business, and I certainly didn't think it was gonna be as quick as I did. I was in what I like to call it in a micro retirement for 6 months. Um, I got a little bit of push. My son, who graduated law school, he started looking into the compliance, the PCI compliance issue of this business. It's like a 400-page document, and if it wasn't for him to read that document, I might have been still reading it. So that was another kind of element that kind of helped me. Um, I think it might depend really on how passionate you are about the next thing, about the next idea. I'm very passionate about this, and I think that's a big driving force for me right now. Even though I I don't really have to do it, I don't have to work. Um, but I think if you believe in the idea and you believe that you can help people, consumers, businesses, um, I think that could be a big positive factor to motivate you and to uplift you. So um, I say don't rush it if you don't feel that it's the right moment. I wouldn't press on it if it's not comfortable in the moment. And I wasn't going to do it on my own. But like I said, once I have the legal side covered, that really made me more comfortable. And maybe that's the answer. Sometimes we need a partner Sometimes we need someone next to us to kind of carry their side of the business or what their expertise are in. And in my case, that was the legal side.
What would you say to viewers or listeners who are watching the show? You're like episode number, I don't know, 110 or something. So there's 109 entrepreneurs that have been on this program before you.
Congratulations.
Well, thanks. Many of them, some of our audience anyway, are not entrepreneurs, or they're not engaged in entrepreneurial stuff. They're working 9 to 5, and they're looking at Viktor, and they're looking at the 109 other Viktors I've had on the show, and or victims maybe, and they're going, man, I want that. I want what they have. They look happy. They're talking about all their success, and yeah, it looked hard, but yeah, but what do you think people misunderstand most about building your own business that you want to warn them about? Dispel some myths for them, because I know they're out there. I started a business 34 years ago, which I still own, and I had no idea what it was like. I had a concept like, well, this is pretty cool. At least I'll be able to set my own hours. At least I won't have a boss. At least I'll be able to like take money out of the company if I want to buy something. All false premises, at least in the beginning. Dispel some myths. Give me a few things that either you thought or people think of entrepreneurship that just are not necessarily accurate.
I mean, you named a few. That's so accurate. I can give you an example. I think I like examples. I learned the best from examples. When I was probably my 6th or 7th year in the business, I had a web designer that worked for me because we constantly need to update prices, right? Online business, it's required adding pictures, all that. And so I had a full-time employee, and he worked for me for about a year. And he came to me one day and says, I'm putting a 2-week notice. I want to start my own e-commerce business, and I'm going to sell plasma TVs. I said, great for starting a business. But I said, instead of maybe quitting, I would like you to stay on, and I'll help you along the way. Because I know that in today's world with all the SEO and sandboxes back in the day when Google had them, it takes a year until you really start to get traffic to your website. And, we had a conversation, and I said, you need savings. If you really decide to leave this full-time job, you need at least 1 year of savings. You need support from home. He was married. I said, is your wife on board? Oh yeah, she wants me to do it. I said, it's one thing she wants you to do it. Can she, carry through 1 year of you not bringing in income home? Yeah, it's all great. I can do that. One thing that really suggested that he's going to be through some tough time with the business was that he says, because I said, why don't you stay 9 to 5 and just when you go home, then work on your business? Build a website, talk to vendors. Even he said, put 2 phones. You have your phone. I said, we'll add another phone that's going to be your line for your business, and you're welcome to use it, an hour or maybe 2 hours a day. It's okay. I don't mind because he doesn't really, as a web designer, he didn't need, he's not a salesperson. And but he didn't. So no, I'm tired. I really work hard here, and when I go home, I really don't have time. I'm exhausted. And I said, that's gonna be hard. And he did quit. 2 weeks. And it was probably like 7th or 8th month after he left. He's calling me at the office. He says, you were right. This cannot be 8 to 5. I burned through my savings. My wife is not happy with me. Can I get my job back? And of course, I hired in the meantime a web designer. I'm saying, I don't need 2 guys right now. He's like, anything. I'll work in a warehouse. Just give me any job. And so to show, you have to have a grit. We as entrepreneurs, could be 11:30 p.m. before midnight. It could be a holiday. You'll be answering emails. You'll be texting people. Um, you have fires to put out, employees, hiring, training. I did not take money out of my business first 2 full years, and we did. First year we did 70,000. The second year with a little over $1 million in sales. I did not take a dime out of the business. I started paying myself low salary, but nothing big. So you have to just have really the drive and the persistency, the resilience, almost like be stubborn and just have the blinders on. This is going to happen. This is what I'm doing. It's not easy, but once the success comes, there's benefits. You can set up your time and you can take extra days off, vacation. You can travel destinations, but that'll be a few years before you can do that.
Yeah. Well, that's good insight. So, Viktor, go back in that time machine. You're 17 years old. You're leaving Yugoslavia, going to Hungary. How did 17-year-old Viktor define what success is then, and how does today's Viktor define what success is?
Wow. I wish I knew that question before. And
there's a reason it's a surprise question.
Yeah. No, all of them were surprise questions, but this is a really surprise question.
That's true, yes. Yeah. And for my audience, I don't share my questions in advance with my guests because I want this to be like two people in a bar over a drink having a casual conversation before they each have to catch their next flight. That's kind of the setting.
And that's where the sincerity is there for sure, because we're digging deep on this one.
Yeah.
I would say the success would have looked like a house, materialistically, if I'm talking about.
Of course.
A good job, a house, and a car. And 2 kids, wife, and that's a perfect life for me. Back when I'm 17, 18, 20 years old, very young.
Yep.
Today, man, what success today is, I would say being married for me has been a blessing. Married 29 years.
Congratulations.
Have had a very supportive wife.
Which, by the way, a partner, a spouse, a husband, a wife, you need that when you start a business because even if they're not like technically like working in the business, they're working in the business. They get sucked in. It's a quicksand.
It's true.
Entrepreneurship does not come alone.
Yeah, I've for years I've always tried to not to bring problems home. But my wife, she sees it. What's going on? What's the issue? I really wanted to always leave the problems at work and not bring them back home. And I think most of the time I was successful. I would say really now, what makes me happy sharing. I was fortunate enough to have really good mentors, good coaches, really excellent, I would say, mentors and business coaches. And some was, just sheer love from them. Some, I had a pay type relationship for consulting type situations, but just being able to be in this position to, here we are, you're asking me questions and I'm able to share my experiences. And I say, if a person listening to or watching the podcast takes one thing from this conversation, I'm happy. It really truly makes me happy because what's better way to give back than offering something that you have? And if I have some knowledge that I can share and that will benefit someone else, it's absolutely a blessing.
Wonderful. Well, since you define one of the definitions of success is being able to share, I would say that today's episode has been successful because you were able to share. And I thank you for all the sharing you've done and sharing your journey. Quite impressive for a 17-year-old. You know, that it takes a while to land that you were 17 when you left your country, when you left your family, your friends, your culture, your language, your perceived security to go to another country. And then you did it again. That is very, very impressive. My parents are both immigrants to this country, and I was born here a few years after they arrived in 1957. But I was able to see the grit and the determination of my parents as they, you know, went to school, got a degree, and got a career, and built their, you know, what we like to say, the American dream. Now, there was the Yugoslavian dream back in the day. There's the Hungarian dream. Everyone has a dream. It's not unique to America, but I was able to watch them build their life. And as immigrants, as, you know, my father was from Poland, so, you know, he had to learn English. And my mother was from Scotland, so she just had to learn how to be understood by Americans because they could never understand the accent. But each of them got professional jobs, nothing to do with what they did in their country, and start over. So I've witnessed that. I'm seeing, you know, you're that as well, which I find incredibly impressive because it just is. I mean, I can't imagine what it would be like, particularly at a young age or any age, even my age now, to just, you know, through circumstance, have to pick up and move somewhere and leave everything behind. I can see that by choice, but by necessity, that's tough. And you know, you not only landed on your feet, you built two companies, one that you were able to sell and one that you're building now. So for my audience who would like to get more information on Avendo and Viktor, if you're watching this on YouTube, right down here, right below me, it says see more. Click that and the URLs will be there for you to follow. And if you're listening to this on your favorite podcast app, go to that podcast app, look at the show notes, and Viktor's information will be there. Viktor, thanks so much for your inspirational story and for your sage advice for me and my audience. I appreciate the generosity of your time and sharing openly with me and my audience.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. It's really you guided me through the questions really nicely. So I thank you for the opportunity to share my story, and hopefully people can have one or two takeaways from it.
Oh, I'm sure they'll have several. Thanks, Viktor. All right, here are some final thoughts. What I appreciated about this conversation is that Viktor's story isn't just about payments, fees, or fintech. It's really about what happens after you've already built something, sold something, and then face the question every entrepreneur eventually has to answer in one form or another. Do I still have another chapter in me? For Viktor, that answer was yes. But the next chapter wasn't about simply starting another company. It was about taking the lessons from his first business, especially the lessons around margins, systems, and founder dependency, and decision-making, and apply them to a problem he believed needed a better solution. And I think that's an important takeaway for every entrepreneur listening or watching. We often focus on revenue, growth, and getting the next customer. And of course, those things matter. But what Viktor reminds us is that the strength of a business is often found in the parts that are less exciting and less visible. The systems, the margins, the process, the decisions made before pressure forces your hand. A business can look successful from the outside and still be fragile on the inside. It can have customers, revenue, and momentum. But if too much depends on the founder, if margins are not protected, or if the systems are not in place, growth can become its own form of risk. And that's one of the themes I'll take away from this conversation. Entrepreneurship requires courage, but it also requires structure. It requires instinct, but it also requires discipline. And while we rarely get perfect information before making big decisions, we can build better systems that help us make those decisions with more confidence. Viktor's journey also speaks to resilience, not the motivational poster version of resilience, but the real version, the kind that comes from experience, uncertainty, setbacks, adaptation, and the willingness to start again with more wisdom than you had the first time. So whether you're building your first business or your next business, or trying to make your current business less dependent on you, there's a valuable lesson here. Don't wait until the business is forced to adapt. Build the systems, protect the margins, and create the structure before you desperately need it. Because in the end, a stronger business doesn't just give you better numbers, it gives you better choices. Now, that is a wrap. Thanks for being part of our Reluctant Entrepreneur family. We've been very busy recording future episodes with amazing guests, so be sure to subscribe to get notified when new episodes drop. If you're an entrepreneur or know someone who would make a great guest, we'd love to hear from you. Visit reluctantentrepreneur.podcast.com, where you can apply or recommend a guest or just learn more about the show. And don't forget to check out my newest series, Reluctant Lessons, When Businesses Go Wrong. On this series, we dig into high-profile business failures and the story behind it all. We've already profiled several companies with many more on the way. As it turns out, there's no shortage. Check out Reluctant Lessons on this channel. And if you're interested in my book, The Reluctant Entrepreneur, Anatomy of a Business Startup from Uncertainty to Unstoppable, it's available in paperback and Kindle on Amazon, and as an audiobook on both Audible and Amazon. And finally, to everyone listening or watching, if you find yourself stepping into entrepreneurship, whether by choice or by circumstance, remember this: sometimes the path we never planned becomes the journey we were meant to take. Thanks so much for being here. I'm out of time. I truly appreciate all of you, and I'll see you again soon.